Good morning. And this morning we talk of Canada and its quest for getting preeminence in the world stage. You see, to get preeminence, any country has to have certain definitive ideas and implement them. Either the country should be extremely militarily strong, or it should have great resources. But both of them have no value until and unless there is a coherent foreign policy. And believe me, the foreign policy of Canada today is so muddle-headed that sometimes I think, and not only me, but the people all over think, what's wrong with the Foreign Office today? This country, which at one time had people like Mackenzie King and Lester Pearson and then Harper, who projected the image of peaceful and strong Canada today, are amused and at times puzzled when they see the muddled antics of our Foreign Office, when the same office projects different views which lack all coherence. Imagine. This government, Justin Trudeau's government, signs an agreement with Ukraine as a precursor to signing TPP. And that is a free trade agreement with Ukraine. Great. At the same time, since August 23, that is just last month or last week, the government has refused to release all satellite data to Ukraine, which has been supplied to them for ages, earlier when it was a part of USSR, and ever since it became a sovereign independent country. And as a matter of fact, this provision of data was enhanced when Canada sent its army to help Ukraine fight Russia. And now, on one side, the Liberal government signs a free trade agreement, and on the other side, stops sharing satellite data, which is of prime importance to them. Without that satellite data, they cannot plan either their defense activities or their weather forecast. They cannot identify the natural resources and how to exploit them. So, what sort of a free trade agreement is there when you do not help or provide the means to develop the trade? This is like the right hand refusing to help wash the left hand. Be sure these things don't go unnoticed. At the same time, Trudeau is cozying up to Putin, which is not a bad idea. Let me tell you very honestly, it's not necessary that to be friendly with Ukraine, you need to be enemy with Russia. But you can be friendly to both while maintaining closer relationship with either country. An even-handed approach should have been sign free trade agreement both with Russia and Ukraine and provide the data. And if you think that data provision is wrong, then you can sell it to them, which is not a bad deal. As a matter of fact, that's an economic activity. And there's no harm in selling information. Information is always for sale. until and unless that information is such that it can be prejudicial to your interest, then of course it's a closely held secret. But the information that you have been sharing for a decade and then you stop it, especially after 1 month after signing the free trade agreement, is something not only puzzling. This is what is called, or what Churchill would have called, an enigma wrapped into mystery. Now let's come to the other side. We claim right to Arctic, and justified so. We will discuss it in another issue because Arctic by itself is a major issue. And the first exploratory ship is of USA. Now the marine laws and the maritime laws of UNO, which cover the right to exploit the natural resources of the oceans, are only relevant for them who have signed those agreements. While Canada, Denmark, Russia, Iceland, all are signatories to that agreement, USA is not. So USA very easily on August 23rd, the same day, sends its ship to start exploring the resources, and Canada cannot do a thing. Because while Canada is covered by that law which it signed, US is not. So not signing an agreement has helped USA explore and then claim right on those resources. Coming back to Ukraine issue, imagine we want to cozy up with Russia, and then we have disputes with them on a multi-level scale. We object to their annexation of Crimea. We say that was a wrong action. And at the same time we are helping Ukraine. We are even sending our 450 soldiers to Poland to help Ukraine ultimately. Those soldiers which will go next year, and some have already left, are a part of the NATO team to fight Russia. So how can you be friendly to Putin when you are opposing his actions? Then, the Russian aeroplanes are buzzing Arctic. They planted the Russian flag on the seabed in Arctic. You protested, which was your right. But you are not going to take any coercive measures because you cannot afford to do that. You do not protect your investments in Colombia, and you want to show yourself a military power and a key peaking force by sending troops to Africa. You do not take any step to be embroiled in Asian countries. The ASEAN, you have not even got an observer status. As a matter of fact, with a number of immigrants from China, Philippines, Vietnam, from Vietnam we have got more than 60,000 people in one go when the refugees came in droves. So these three major countries have got a lot of immigrants over here. And their issues, they are sitting on a explosive situation today because of the South China issue. And we have not taken a stand on that, thereby creating a rift with those countries. You have to, again, when the Hague Court judgment came, for 1 week we did not react to that. And Stephen Dion, when he reacted to that, reacted in a way that shows your weakness. He didn't say that he welcomed the judgment. He did not say that China should act on the judgment, but he said only one thing, that Manila and other countries should sit with China and resolve the issue. The high faulting morality that used to be the bedrock of Canadian foreign policy is missing. We used to be very assertive that the morality in politics must be maintained. Today we are not doing that. We say we'll welcome the refugees. We welcome the refugees, but the Christian refugees are a fraction of that. Why? This muddling at the domestic front is something which can be attributed to the need to keep your vote base. But this confused state of affairs, when it afflicts your foreign policy, definitely shows that you are not careful about your international standing, and your hopes of getting the Security Council seat are likely not to be fulfilled. You know, there's an old story that you cannot keep everybody happy. And that story has a lot of significance in the modern world, where the world is polarized and absolutely opposing ideologies are adopted by diverse countries. To talk of any least common denominator is to show your lack of understanding of the situation proper. It also shows the lack of spine, and ultimately it shows a lack of your credibility. The moment you start compromising in a bid to be seen as a goody-goody person, then you lose your standing as a country of high moral fiber. This was a country which could oppose USA, Russia, England and France at the same time in 1957, when it opposed the invasion of Suez by Israel, France and England, and Russia supported that invasion indirectly, and so did USA. But Canada had the courage to condemn that. If a similar situation was to be there today, do you think that sort of high moral tone would ever be used by Canada? No. We are seeing it. On the one side, we are with Ukraine, and we also develop and sign an agreement with them, and then we scuttle the base of that agreement. Now, when the foreign policy of a country is so muddled and confused, the action of the other countries would be equally confused. They do not know that either are we going to be consistent in our professions, in our statements and in our actions? Would our actions in future be in consonant and conformity with our professed statements, or would they be at variance, as this incident has shown? You see, in an international diplomatic world, each incident, each action is taken as a symptom of the real situation. And any deviation, as this one shows, proves that that country, which can go against an established principle, cannot be relied on. The Liberal government today wants to pose as an inheritor of the tradition of Lester Pearson, Mackenzie King and others. But it's a pale imitation of that, because the consistency is not there, because the contradictory approaches are being adopted, and because we waver from our condemnation to our praise. Now, whether you agree with the former Prime Minister Harper or not is something different, but he was very firm in opposing Russia when the Ukraine issue started. Right or wrong is something different. I at that time differed with him as well on that. But then he was consistent. He said, no, this is wrong, we do not accept it. And the 11 years he continued, he did not change an iota from his original stand. And here's a government which signs an agreement and within 24 hours goes against that and start cozying up to the arch enemy of Ukraine. An enemy against whom you are sending your forces. I don't want them to be enemy of Russia, no. I don't want them to be friendly with both. But at the same time, there has to be a definitive, clear-cut policy, what we are, what are our hopes and aspirations, and how are we going to act and interact at the international level. You know, a weak-kneed, vacillating, confused policy would send such signals that would not be useful for the future of the country. As a matter of fact, there is every fear that the other countries may take undue advantage of this confused state of affairs, and that might not be in the best interest of the country as a whole. There is need to have a proper think tank and a consistent, well-formulated policy taking into consideration the needs of this country and the geopolitical situation of the world. You cannot ignore the emerging markets. You cannot afford to annoy the continent that is full of resources. You cannot ignore the fact that a large majority of your citizens have roots abroad, and where their interests are not identical, at times they are inimical. You have got to ensure that those enmities do not percolate here. And for that, your policy has to be modulated to project Canada first, Canada last. Your policies have to be modulated on the basis of morality, professionalism, and self-interest. Again, I repeat, self-interest must be the motivating factor, but that doesn't mean cheating. That means clarity of what your interests are and telling people, okay, we are with the world, but we will not compromise on the basic principles of our founding fathers. Is this asking too much from this government? Would the country not feel more amenable to a better life and a better future and a better international standing if we project a cohesive, well-defined policy that shows our independence, our freedom of thought, and our care for the humanity as a whole, while not sacrificing our own national interest? Think about it. Good day. चंगा कर देना।